biggest problem these days, Chris, it seems to me, is, things are tight at the local level. Taxes are too high. There's too much of a pressure on businesses and on residents these days, largely because the state doesn't allow us to fix our own stuff. In other words, when you look at the city's budget, and I'll be presenting it this week, we have the biggest cost drivers are charter schools, which is a state mandate. It's pensions, and the city has very little control over pension benefits and eligibility, and health care, the eligibility for which, for both employees and retirees, is severely constrained by state law. And so the point's going to come, mind this is all happening when the economy's going pretty well,
right?
Not just here, but also statewide. And so, causes one to wonder, well, what's going to happen when the economy turns, right? As it inevitably will,
yes,
right?
The business cycle, yes.
Right. So when we have a downturn in the business cycle, how's that going to play out in terms of the available resources for a city like New Bedford to provide basic services? And so I've been saying for a long time that it's going to be hard on us. I think that other cities that don't manage their finances as well as we do will go over the waterfall, and I think it'll take that for the state to wake up and say, you know what, we need to give mayors and city councils a little more room to change pension and healthcare benefits in a way that's fair to recipients, but also allows municipalities to stabilize their finances.
And in the long run, it's better for pensioners, as we've seen in other parts of the country when cities can't make it.
Right. Look at Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico just declared bankruptcy last week. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. And so you think about people who were employed in Puerto Rico over the last 50 years, retirees and current employees who are wondering today whether they're going to get a paycheck at all. Right. And that's a place that's shutting schools and firehouses and police stations, and there's a ton of turmoil there. But in part, it's because they didn't handle their finances well over a long period of time. Yeah,
the Wall Street Journal has a couple articles, of course, this week about the Puerto Rican financial challenges and the bankruptcy, and they're pointing out that the retiree is in the same boat as the bondholder in New York or France, or wherever they're holding the bonds. And so as they begin to do the settlements and do the payouts, everyone's going to get slashed across the board.
Everybody's going to feel it. So and it takes a long time to recover from that. So in answer to your question, yeah, I'm concerned when the state says its revenues are down. But I wish that I had the authority, like mayors in other states, to say, you know what, if we tweak this, we tweak that, pensions, healthcare, in ways that are reasonable to beneficiaries, we can be on solid ground. But I can't do that, and that's a big problem in Massachusetts. We're one of these.
Well, there's a way you could do that.
Well, not in the absence of a legislative change.
We could just run you for governor.
Well, let's do that then.
Well, let me ask you this, Mayor Mitchell. We're speaking with Mayor Mitchell of New Bedford. Is anybody at the state listening?
I've had these conversations with a lot of folks, a lot of the state leadership, and I think that they just see there's a different political reality for us, not just a political or a financial reality. And it's this: in the cities in Massachusetts, outside of Boston, so I'm not talking Boston or Cambridge or those places, but New Bedford, Springfield, and then some of the smaller ones like Brockton and Fall River and so forth. Those are places where the financial constraints are really acute. And the reality is that these are all places that don't have the political heft in Boston that they had 30, 40 years or so ago. And so that's a problem. So when we raise our hand and say, you know what, things are a little uncomfortable financially, they don't get heard as well. So it's going to take, when I raise this stuff with state leaders, their answer is, well, until you start laying off police officers, it's probably unlikely that they're going to do anything about it, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, extremely unfortunate.
Yeah, in other words, there has to be a crisis in order for them to do something. But
we had a caller, Mayor Mitchell, who asked me about lottery funds and what impact is that having now, because it was set up originally to benefit municipalities. And I know the money still comes into the municipalities, but what sort of impact does that have for the city? And revenues up or down, if you know?
Offhand, I don't think we've seen a dramatic change. I think it's been fairly steady. I can't remember the exact number. For some reason, $7 million sticks out, but that may be wrong. But I don't. Last I checked, it was pretty stable.
Okay, all right. And this is a little bit out of left field, but I'm noticing around here that we're seeing businesses, not in New Bedford, but in Fairhaven in particular, businesses closing down. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that, because I see a lot of this as
Are you talking about retailers?
Retailers.
Yeah.
Retailers closing down.
This is you went on 1420 WBS.
With the rise of the internet. It's just a reality that more and more people, at my house, a package or two comes every day.
Right.
And we buy tons of stuff.
It's all your fault.
It is all my fault. I am draining the economy of Fairhaven. But as we see places like Amazon open up, and a lot of people are working there, and that's great, but you see retailers closing down because people aren't necessarily using them. And what impact do you see is that maybe having on local communities, because that's where we get our revenues, property taxes?
Well, so yeah, retail's really struggling nationally, largely because of the rise of internet retailing. And so Amazon and Walmart, and with Walmart, which has a big internet presence now, are really gobbling up much of retail in America. And so you're seeing places, traditional blue chip retailers like Sears and JCPenney and Macy's close up stores all over the place. We've seen them. You haven't seen it yet in this area, but I mean, if you go over to the North Dartmouth Mall, I would suspect that if you ask some of the people who work at those stores, they'd say, yeah, things are over time coming down, and it's just hard for traditional malls to to stay afloat. If you look, for instance, over in Fall River at the Harbor Mall, that's kind of gone away,
right? Pretty
much, right? It's getting totally redone in a way that's not recognizable. So that's just the way of the world these days. So the kind of retailers, brick and mortar retailers that will continue on are going to be the small niche ones, the ones that where people, especially a good example would be like women's clothing stores. So stuff like that, that are small, that don't have a lot of overhead, that have a niche product that you might not be willing to buy over the internet because you can't see it and try it on and all that. Those are the ones that are going to survive, as well as the ones where you can have a service provided, where there is a service that goes along with the sale, right? In other words, so here's an example, right? Downtown, Crush Wine on Purchase Street.
Sure.
Great place, right? But you walk into a wine store like that, and you look at all the bottles and you can't tell one label from another, and you need to rely on somebody to say, who's tried every single one, like Christian Vasilev, the owner, who knows this stuff, and he can say, I think given your taste, you'll like that one.
Yes.
Right? So that's just one example, but it's those kinds of places, and you can't get that over the internet.
That's correct, you can't.
And so it's those kinds of places that are going to continue to thrive. It's not going to be the big box stuff.
It's not often I get to speak to someone who has a degree in economics from Harvard. That's why I ask these questions.
Give me too much credit. Yeah.
Okay, downtown New Bedford, big development, new hotel coming in. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good project. 68-room hotel in the old WBSM building, right on the corner of Pleasant and Union Streets.
Right.
And it's a building that's been empty for a long time. It's been, if you remember, a little over 10 years ago, there's a really nasty shooting there that was, where there was the bullet hole right in the front window for a long time. Things are changing, and that block is going to be alive. That the hotel market in New Bedford is really strong. The Fairfield Marriott on the waterfront is doing very, very well. It's almost always full, and so there's room for more hotels in New Bedford. So we're trying to promote that, and the more residential density we have in the downtown, whether it's people living there or people staying in a hotel, is good for retail, among other things, and restaurants, because it generates foot traffic. And that's what you need in a place like in a downtown. You need most of the shoppers, or a lot of the shoppers, are going to be people who are just walking around.
Sure.
Because you don't have strip mall style parking where people can pull up. You don't have that. It's too dense. So this is going to be a really big development. They'll be done in about a year. And one of the things that I like to see there is, so a couple of things. One is not just the density, right? There are more people milling around, but also another restaurant that'll come with it, and the fact that it marks the continuing march of development up Union Street.
Right.
So, we've talked a lot about how we want to knit the downtown and the central waterfront, but we also want to knit the downtown and the West End as well. So you start to get people walking back and forth. So It's a good thing. It's a really good thing, and I think it's going to help support the burgeoning restaurant scene in the downtown. And the more the better.
Well, I also think what's promising about it is that these folks have established, I believe, in 28 states. They have about 3,000 hotel rooms. This is their business. They know what they're doing.
Oh, they know what they're doing.
And they could have selected anywhere to get a return on this capital, but they decided that investing in New Bedford is going to get them their best or equal a return on their capital.
Right.
And that's a great signal for this area.
Right. It is. And that demand is very real, and we've seen it grow over the years. I think the restaurants help, but it's the success of the Zeiterion and the Whaling Museum that helped as well, and so we're really trying to build on top of that as much as we can.
People are always complaining about parking downtown. It looks like you guys are trying to remedy that with some projects. What are you doing for parking down there?
Well, the parking constraints is a reflection of growth. That's kind of a problem you want to have.
Sure.
So if parking is free is easy to find, it means nobody's going there. Right. So, but I take the parking complaints legitimately. I mean, I've gotten my own share of got more than my own share of tickets actually.
Have you paid them?
I paid everyone, Chris. Everyone promptly.
You know Tito Jackson?
No. Oh, I see.
Terrible, yeah.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, skipping out on.
Oh, and Obama, too. But anyway. And Chris McCarthy, let's be honest. I don't pay him either.
Well, so let me just say John Mitchell pays his tickets, okay? For the record. So, but in any case, yeah, so we're doing a number of things. There'll be a parking study probably done in the next several months that I think will help reconcile some of the inconsistencies in pricing, for instance, and availability of space, and look at valeting services and so forth. But we're also putting a lot of money into the garage.
Right.
The garage has been there, the big garage, the Elm Street garage has been there for almost 40 years, and there's been no major investment in it since it was built. And so we're putting in about $5 million from a federal grant as well as revenue from both the garage as well as the parking meters to stick in there and to so no taxpayer dollars to put in there and really dress it up and make it look like a lot more inviting. As we've gotten used to it, it's it's just a big cement block. It's not exactly. It's got that Soviet style architecture, right? Which is not exactly inviting.
No.
So we took a look at some parking garages, and the one that stands out to me as being a good model for it is the one right next to the Dunkin' Donuts Center in Providence, which has a really nice atrium. You go in, and it's very inviting. It's well lighted. We want to do something like that. So that's what people can expect to see. And again, that project's probably going to take place over the next year.
Hey, great, because I know it's an issue, but as you point out, if people weren't coming downtown, there'd be no problem with parking, and then there'd be a bigger problem. On the monuments out there in the ocean, the President Obama, you were involved in trying to have input on that project,
right,
as it was coming to fruition. But now it looks like I know the Wall Street Journal had an editorial that the president's looking to review everything that's gone on since the Clinton administration. Do you have any hope for that?
Well, I do. I've continued those conversations. I had sort of testified on this on Capitol Hill about a month and a half ago. I say sort of because I submitted the testimony in writing, but it was the day after we had a lot of snowstorm, a big snowstorm, and so all the flights were canceled, so I couldn't physically testify. But nevertheless, it was on the monument issue. And I've also had a good conversation with folks in the White House about this issue about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And so they are looking at this. And it just seems to me that there's a way to, if there isn't a way to eliminate it entirely, it may be a good compromise position. If you remember, on the monument, there is the monument encompasses both sea mountains and sea canyons, and there really isn't a whole lot of fishing going along the mountains, which are off the continental shelf. So if people can picture this, you go to the continental edge of the continental shelf, and then it just drops off, like 1,000 feet or so. I can't remember how big it is, but it just drops off. And then farther out to sea, there are these mountains. And the reason they were protected is because they were supposedly areas that were ecologically sensitive.
Okay.
Right? So that's the rationale. The point that I've tried to make all along is that, and if you're going to keep people out of a particular area in perpetuity, forever, right?
Right.
You got to have a good reason for it. And so that needs to be backed up with scientific research that has a chance to be peer reviewed. There have to be public hearings. There has to be feedback, and that stuff generally didn't happen with this process, and that's the problem. So I've argued for more process. In other words, more input from stakeholders, more scientific peer review, and so forth before we do these things. Because look, NOAA under the Magnuson Act does this stuff all the time, right? They designate closed areas for scalloping. They say you can't for the foreseeable future you can't tow your scallopers can't tow in the particular area, or other fishermen can't fish in the area. When they do that, which is on a temporary basis, it's not permanent.
Right.
They go through all sorts of hearings, right? So there's a little bit of a contradiction here in the sense that under the Antiquities Act, the president can just say that area over there off limits, and there doesn't have to be any process involved. So that's kind of screwed up. On this particular monument, the areas around the seamounts are probably not going to be fished all that much. I don't think that's that big of a deal. Around the canyons, the border of the monument gets into an area where there's crabbing going on, some lobstering going on, and even gets close to an area where there's some scalloping going on. So that's a little too close for comfort. That's the area where I've been pushing back the most. But you've been able to offer input to the White House, and they're taking it, and so that's a positive. Right. And so I'm sure there will be more follow up on that as time goes on.
That's positive. Mayor, the Carlos Rafael issue is coming up. You and I have talked about it on the Boston radio station.
Right.
There's something in here in the Standard Times from yesterday that the Labor Council's weighed in on this. They want the permits to stay here. Any more information on that? Anything you can offer?
Yeah, I mean, I've continued to have the conversations, including with NOAA. I think it's NOAA's decision. It's not the U.S. Attorney's Office's decision. It's really NOAA's decision. And what I've tried to suggest to them is that, look, they have broad authority, broad discretion to do what they want with the permits. They can pull them from Carlos and resell them. They can just revoke them entirely and redistribute his quota wherever it goes. Or they can say, you know what, you can sell those permits with the quota that goes along with it. So people know the quota is the amount of fish that is associated with a particular permit. So this stuff gets complicated,
right?
But just so people understand the terminology. And you can sell them, Carlos, and use the proceeds and to discharge your responsibility, your forfeiture responsibility of the government. In other words, you sell a permit and it goes for, just pick a number, $100,000. You turn the $100,000 over to NOAA, that kind of thing. I don't know that they're going to be that flexible. I have my doubts about it, and I'll continue to make the case, as I have really for the last 6 months on this. And my hope is that if all else fails and the permits get revoked, then it'll be okay in the long run if we continue to see the current trend, which is all the boats on the East Coast are more or less coming to New Bedford these days anyway.
Okay, so it's not a
may not be. It remains to be seen.
Thanks a lot for joining us, Mayor Mitchell.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. And if you would like to get more videos like this, please hit the subscribe button below on the WBSM channel. Subscribe to WBSM, and that way you'll always get the latest videos here from Sunday Brunch and the other wonderful programs on WBSM.